You know, I didn't know any writers per se, but we were surrounded by books in my house, and I think that that's how I became a writer, was through loving books. I know that my parents always read to me. I know some of my earliest childhood pictures when I'm probably under 1 year old, I'm pulling books out of the bookshelf, and I clearly had a sense that there was something good in them, that was why my parents were reading them. And we had a lot of poetry and kind of fun, comical verse. My father, who didn't learn English till he was 16, he really loved Ogden Nash, and we had a lot of funny poems. We had Dennis Lee, who's a Canadian writer. He had this book I remember when I was a child called Wiggle to the Laundromat, and that had great little ditties in it, and I think I just loved sound and words and humor, and that's where that started, through reading. Yes, definitely. My first book, which was a story collection, it had a pretty suburban setting, and I grew up in suburban New Jersey. So I was definitely writing about the types of people I knew and about public high school, pretty everyday, I think, sort of typical suburban experience. And then my second book, well, it's funny, it's called Russian Winter, and half of it's set in communist Russia after World War II, and obviously I didn't grow up there or live in that time, but my father's side, my father grew up in communist Hungary. So he came west in the 50s, and I think I was trying to figure out more about my family on that side and the people who still live there. So, you're sort of writing about what you know or what you're curious about. That's a great question, because I think what we want to accomplish probably isn't necessarily the same thing that motivates us. I would love to feel like I'm writing about experience that might be lost otherwise, or broadening the world for people who haven't experienced something that they can read about. And I know there's a sense that I think a lot of writers have of trying to capture something that just might otherwise be lost. But I think that actually when I look back at my work, it's because I'm trying to figure something out about myself or my family or people I know. Yes and no, because I know that if I'm rereading a draft and it seems to be moving slowly, I'm thinking of the audience. Not just myself, but a sense of, if I'm getting impatient, other people might be impatient, so maybe this needs to move more quickly. And I know I always show things to my sister because she's a very judgmental person, and I think, she'll know if it's good or not. She's the kind of reader I have in mind, but I think that while I'm writing, I'm just in the work. I think it's when I'm looking at it later as a draft, so that's different from who I'm writing for while I'm writing. Probably just myself. I mean, they're completely different, because the experience, whether it's from jumping on a freight train or working in your uncle's garden somewhere, for a year or something, I think is completely separate from applied study of a craft. And the writing program helped me in that, well, in the broadest way, it acknowledged, we think you're a writer too. And it made something legitimate that I think a lot of people in the outside world, it's like, what are you doing? You're writing? But if you say, oh, I'm going to a program, oh, it must be something real. And sure enough, you show up there, and for somebody like me who had not been an English major and didn't have that background, to see that, oh, you can study literature and write papers about it that help you think about structure and craft and tone and mood and how you create that on a page. That's really valuable if you have good teachers. And I learned a lot by being in these workshops with other writers. Most importantly, though, I feel like I gained mentors who were my professors, who still, even now, support me, and also fellow writers who even now I show my work to. And this was, I came here in '93. That's a long time ago, and yet I'm still swapping work with some of these people because we trust each other and we like each other's writing. That said, when I was in the program, I was too young really to write anything terribly meaningful because I had not had, I think, any great, profound experience that had maybe moved me into true adulthood yet. I was just out of school, of undergraduate school. So I think, and I notice as somebody who sometimes helps select the candidates for the program here, the master's program, often I'll read something and think, this person can write. And I don't know who this person is, but they seem really young, and they'll be a writer at some point, but they're not ready for the program because they don't have that thing to write about. So, you know, nothing big and bad the way some people have to fight for freedom of speech, or their parents have forbidden it, or, you know, they're doing it in secret. I think for me, the first obstacle was just ignorance of the fact that you could do that. Because I went to college, I always was writing. I mean, even when I was very young, I was filling notebooks, and I remember in college writing novels in notebooks to myself, and it was just to myself. And at some point when I was a senior in college, I realized, oh, you can study that, there are classes. I mean, it did not even occur to me. I didn't know it was in my own school that I could have done that. And so just some maybe sense that this is something you, a girl, can do. And I don't know why I didn't feel that, because I had a very supportive youth and everything, but there was I needed some pat on the back to say, no, 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 it's a legitimate thing that you yourself could do. Two things. I mean, the first thing would just be to read everything, get your hands on everything, any kind of writing, you know. Just read voraciously. That's how you learn, and I feel like that's how I learned as much as I also studied it. But as far as actually succeeding as a writer who's writing good stuff that's worth showing to the world, I think the key thing is revising your work. And I'm saying this after many years of teaching. And what I notice really makes a difference. You know, I'll have incredibly talented students, and they'll write a really good draft of something, and it's not quite working yet, and you'll talk about it and say, here are the things you could do, and then it would be really super. And, you know, that's where they stop. It's somehow the effort to do that is too much, or the yearning to perfect something is not strong enough. And it took me a long time to realize, oh no, that's okay if they wrote something for class and people liked it, but it's not going to be something that is going to really touch the hearts of readers until you've pushed it to that highest level. And I think that's what revision does.